Hello and welcome. This is Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, and I created this show to share resources with women to help them navigate career and life challenges and to know that you are not alone. So each week, I invite a guest to co-create a show with me to encourage women to be more confident, resilient, and brave in their careers and their lives. So if something inspires you today and you would like more of the same, please subscribe, comment, share, and be sure to check out the show notes below when we're done for ways to connect with my guest and me. So, change in any life situation can be challenging, but making a career change is particularly difficult because it affects so many other things. The fear of making the wrong choice, or maybe the feeling that you're discarding hard earned, long devoted experiences, and all of that can weigh pretty heavily on you. But don't worry, because we're here today to address some of those common roadblocks uh, with my guest. My guest is Meghan McCaffery, and she's a colleague who shares my passion for helping individuals navigate meaningful career transitions. Meghan's journey from educator to teacher educator to nurse to business owner and coach has equipped her with profound insights into the intricacies of making a career change. Meghan's unique approach involves meeting clients where they are and expertly guiding them down new paths. So, whether you're yearning for a complete career transformation, or maybe you're finally ready to pursue that long put off career dream, or you may just need a strategic pivot within the role you're in or within the company you're in now. Meghan's practical and logistical methods, which start with mindset, will empower you to embrace change and thrive. So let's see what new possibilities we can conjure for you today. Welcome, Meghan.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so delighted you joined us today. You and I do very similar things, and we all have our unique ways to do them. So I am delighted to have you here to have this conversation because we are kind of kindred spirits, I think.
For sure.
So let's talk a bit about your diverse career. Tell us a bit about the transitions you made.
So, my first transition was when I was a teacher and I went on to become a nurse. I think at that time, it wasn't that I didn't like teaching anymore. I just didn't see myself in it for the long haul or see myself really going after more in it. And I had this calling to be a nurse, and there's no other way for me to describe it other than a calling. It was just something that I felt driven to go after and wanted to do. So at the time that I decided to make the change to become a nurse, I'd been teaching for 10 years and I had already, I had gotten married and had two children. So I decided to go back to school and become a nurse. Um, so that took, a little bit of time, took about a couple of years, 2 years to become a nurse to get my license. And then I started doing the nursing job. Um, and so that transition from teacher to nurse was like I said, it was a calling. It was something that I was drawn to do, and I just couldn't ignore it. Then, towards the end of my nursing career, I'm still a licensed nurse. I just don't practice with it anymore. But I'd say the last 1 to 2 years of my nursing career was when I really started to feel this pull, like there was just something missing. I wanted more, just wasn't, and I had tried different jobs as a nurse. I wasn't just in one role the whole time. And I just knew there was something else out there for me. And so that's when I really took the time to get to know me again and what I wanted and to kind of design a life based off of that, and have my career go hand in hand with that. Um, so yeah, transitioning into becoming a business owner and coach was what that led to eventually. So,
Oh, I love the way you put that. Uh, when you were a teacher, you didn't see yourself doing that for a long time or to take it to the next level, right?
right.
And you had a calling. So I want to talk a little bit about, let's dig under that just a little bit.
Okay.
What did that feel like? I want people who are listening to be able to kind of see themselves in that as well. And I think when we talk about feelings, a lot of those things bubble up to the top for us. So
Hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about how that felt, that calling to do something really totally different? Although
Hmm.
I suspect you're a bit of a teacher when you're a nurse as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like all of the, teacher, nurse, coach, they all kind of have a common thread through them,
Yeah.
right? But different skills needed for each. So the feeling of becoming, now this was, 15 years ago or more. I'd have to do the math, but it was a while ago. So I have to really like put myself back in that place. Um, Having a calling, it was, so I think first of all, if you go back to when I became a teacher, when I was in college, I was in my 20s, I was young, and it was more thinking about how I wanted my life to look based off of like knowing I wanted a family and these things, and then evolved to having a job that kind of let me um, focus on my family also. And then I think when I had this calling to become a nurse, it was more like something that was meant, it was more for just me and something inside of me that I felt that I needed to fulfill. It was a desire, this nagging sensation of you you need to pursue this. I knew I didn't want to continue and, 10 years later wish that I had done it
Yeah.
or even further down the line. Like I knew
Mm.
I needed to go ahead and see it through.
Hmm. Yeah. So it's something that you can't, you said it earlier too, that you can't ignore. Or if you
Mhm.
did, you might regret.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you and I have had a conversation, obviously, before we met here today.
Mhm.
And I know that you have made this connection between career transitions and the seasons, what I call the seasons of life or the stages of life that we all go through. Tell us a little bit about how you see that connection.
So I think most of this I kind of picked up on in hindsight and that, when I was reflecting back on
As we
those
often
different
do,
careers,
right?
right? Right.
Right.
So I think it's really interesting. And then I started noticing it in my clients as well, of those changes that were happening in their lives that made them want to shift their careers as well. I think we all go through certain things as we're, growing as adults. We enter the workforce. We may get married or may not have kids. And I think another thing, there's divorce, or I already said getting married, all of these different things that happen to us in our life. And whether we realize it or not, many times our career choices can be based off of those circumstances in our life. And I think some people also, maybe when they're unhappy in their job or in their career, might not realize it could be one of these major life things that have happened in their lives that has caused this, like they're no longer aligned with their job because of this life change. So when you can bring awareness to that, sometimes it's like a light bulb going off, right? Like, oh, yeah, that job used to fulfill this part, this need that I had, but it no longer does. I mean, I can give an example of that if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
please
might
do.
make it easier for people to see.
Yeah.
So, I have 2 children, so a lot of my examples come based off of that. So one of my change from being a nurse to a coach happened, when I started having that feeling of not quite being satisfied. I also knew that my youngest daughter she was about a year off from going to college. And when I thought about that and that, how my life would look differently with both of my children out of the house most of the time, I knew that what I was currently doing was not going to fulfill me anymore. The things that I had in that job were things that I needed in order to function as a single mom, essentially. Um, as far as a flexible schedule, I still want a flexible schedule, but it's for different reasons now. But those things were that were being fulfilled. I knew once I had the empty nest the majority of time, were not going to be met anymore. And another one, if you have young kids, maybe you're used to having to, your job gives you the schedule where you can bring them to school, pick them up from school, you can be there for all their after school activities. It might allow you to do all those things. But then once your kids are older and maybe don't need you to be as involved in those day-to-day things, you might notice that you're not feeling the same way about your job. And a lot of times it's because, or part of it at least, is because you're no longer needing that from that job. And maybe that's the main reason you picked it. And
Yeah.
now it's not there anymore.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here are all of the kind of influences, life influences that cause us to evolve
Hmm.
as we are going through those life seasons. And there are so many others too that could influence how we feel or what we need from our career or our job.
Hmm.
I think about some that have happened to me, where being caregiver
Hmm.
for my father at first, and now for my husband. So the things that have happened in my life have caused me to need something different from the work I do and the schedule I keep and the kind of flexibility I have, the kind of responsibility I have in
Hmm.
the work environment, so that I can be available when I need to be, and so I can be present for other things
Right.
besides the work I do.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what other, let's just talk about some other possibilities of life
Okay. Yeah.
changes that could
So
come up
some of
for
the
people.
things I've seen in clients, I think not just the health of others, like you were speaking about being a caregiver for, maybe an aging parent or a spouse, also your own health. I've had clients who
Right.
have gone through their own health changes or health conditions
Absolutely.
that have made them reevaluate what they do in ways that maybe, I mean, it could be that maybe you can't perform that job anymore because of your health status, or it could be you had something really scary happen to you health wise. And it kind of made things, it made you reprioritize what you were doing in
Yes.
your life. And so you realize now that you don't want to waste your time at a job that's unfulfilling or that doesn't, you know, make you happy, or when you're off, you're just dreading going back to work.
Yeah.
You want to really find that thing that's going to make you have that joy. Because I think whatever you're doing in your career, if you have joy in it, it's going to spill over to your life and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Um, I think another one that I see a lot also is maybe you went into a job out of college and you did the same thing for about, let's say, a decade. So now you have, you've got a little time under your belt. Maybe you're making more money. Maybe you have more time off, and you realize maybe you want to travel more. And the job you currently have maybe doesn't support that. Maybe you have more time off, but the culture of the job is, uh, we really, here's your time off, but we don't really want you to take it, kind of thing.
Oh, right.
And they
Yeah.
realize,
Yeah.
like there's a guilt associated with taking that time off.
Or there are
So,
limitations associated with that time off. You can't take more than a week at a time, stuff
right,
like that.
right,
Yeah, I've heard a lot of about that kind of restriction. Yeah.
right. So then they decide they want to find either another job or a career that's going to allow them to live the life that they want to live
Right.
as well.
I think it's becoming more and more important to people, um, that they are doing what they love to do, not
Hmm.
so much what other people's expectations of them have dictated in the past.
Right.
Living up to other people's expectations, becoming a lawyer or a doctor. We hear about that a lot because
Hmm.
everyone in my family is a lawyer or a doctor, and that's
Right.
expected of me, right? It's to, prolong the legacy of this, but it may not
Right.
be right for this individual. They don't have the love for it, the passion for it. They can't
Right.
stomach the blood if they wanted to be a doctor, and how did that happen in this family, right? So what
Yeah.
else can you do, and how do you explore those options? So,
Right.
our priorities shift all the time,
Yes.
and it can affect the decisions we make.
Hmm.
So, especially when it comes to making career changes, which are, I think a lot of people think that making a career change is like the biggest deal in their life. And maybe it is. It
Hmm.
is only, I talk about it being, if we looked at all the aspects of our life, I I teach either between 7 and 10 aspects of our life. Career is just one of those. So 1/7 of our entire life. Yet
Hmm.
we spend at least 1/3 of our waking hours at it, at
Right.
least 1/3 of our
Right.
waking hours. So it has a big effect, an impact, an
Yeah.
influence on
Yeah.
everything else we do, to say nothing that it is probably the source of income that allows us to do everything else in our lives, right? So there's a
Right.
big deal. It is a big deal.
Yeah. 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 And I think, like you said, your priorities change. So when you selected a certain job that you're in, you had a certain set of priorities.
Hmm.
And as you've gone on and lived your life throughout that, all of these different life things happen along the
Yeah.
way, and your priorities shift. And I think the important thing is to remember is that you can shift your career or job while you're, while those life things are happening and changing your priorities. That you still have that choice to change if you
Mm,
want to.
right. It's not an easy one to make a lot of
No,
times, right?
no.
So let's talk about that for a minute. I said in the introduction that a lot of things weigh heavily on us when we think about making a career change. Will I be able to make enough money? Will
Hmm.
I have to start at the bottom again?
Hmm.
Uh, what are some of the other things that might come up for someone who's thinking about making those roadblocks? What are some
Yeah.
more of those roadblocks?
I think people sometimes are afraid of the benefits that they'll lose,
Yeah,
when it comes to the job that they're in.
yeah,
The, maybe that can also provide like I had a client who needed certain health benefits. She really
Yeah.
wanted to go out on her own, but she needed good, affordable health insurance. So that was a huge deciding factor in what she did next.
Yep.
I think some other things are, I think you already touched, like seniority, like kind of, I'm going to, like you said, start at the bottom again. Another thing can be you think you don't qualify for a new, you think changing a complete career change will take so much time, right? And there's the thing of what you've already invested in where you are, like the sunk cost fallacy, right? I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with that, but
Yeah.
maybe the listeners aren't. But it's, this feeling of, well, especially if it's, you went to college and you got a degree and then you've worked in this industry for 5 to 10 years and you feel like it's all going to be for nothing
Right.
if you change careers.
Right.
And I try to tell people, no, it's still, you're not starting over. You're
Right.
just moving on. And that goes with you, that
Right.
experience.
So that's right, with the skills that you've learned. So I work with my clients all the time to help them translate those skills, identify what those hard and soft skills are, and
Right.
then figure out how they translate into whatever is next for them. And what is that vision for them? What do they want? What do they,
Mm-hmm.
what? And then once they see, right, that those skills can translate, they understand
Mm-hmm.
that
Right.
they're not starting over. They are starting from here
Mm-hmm.
with
Right.
all that experience, all the life skills and the career skills, the hard ones, the
Right.
soft ones, the things that translate so well into
Mm-hmm.
doing something else and figuring that
Mm-hmm.
out. It's a scary process for a lot of people to think
It
about.
is. I think another thing that comes up for people is they're worried about what people will say.
Yes.
They, not just coworkers, there's also your family. I know for me, that was one of my biggest ones, moving on to, leaving nursing to becoming a business owner. I was,
Yes.
my dad is probably my biggest, supporter in my life. Like he's my biggest, my number one fan in my fan club, uh, after my children probably. But I was so scared to tell him because I was like, oh, he's gonna, I thought maybe he would be like, no, you shouldn't do that. You need to stay with
Right.
what you have, kind of thing.
Right. Right.
And actually, what I had conjured up in my mind was not the case at all.
Yeah.
And he
We do that so
fully supported
often,
me.
right? We're
Yeah.
afraid of the judgment,
Mhm.
and then we don't give them a chance to support us.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And
so
it's also
often the case.
realizing that, yeah, if you do get the judgment though, then that's on them. And you still get to
Right,
make the choices for yourself in life.
right, right. And we have to. This takes some courage to
Mhm.
stop living up to other people's expectations of us and start living for our own, deciding
Right.
what it is we want and
Yeah.
understanding what the why is behind that and allow
Yes.
that to be our foundation. And then we can
Right.
push through any kind of judgment because we feel confident about what it is we want to do. And yes, there may be risks associated with it, but they're
Mhm.
calculated risks. We're not jumping into something totally
Right.
unprepared, right? And we're taking with us all of that stuff, that experience, those skills. We're bringing all of that with us so that we can learn new ones.
Right. And I'm glad you said that about knowing your why. That is one of the things I spend time on in the beginning of coaching with someone is getting a very firm foundation of their why.
Why
And I
you want
actually
to do it.
call it your why, your who, and your when.
Yep.
So we'll go deep into your why. And I talk to them about getting a personal why and then also like a professional why. because I think sometimes we feel torn, like we can't have, but like it should be personal, but really sometimes it's maybe you want to make more money and that's okay. And so I try to encourage them to do a personal why and a professional why.
Right.
And then the who, a lot of times our personal why is tied to a who. It might not always be. It can completely be about yourself, but it can also be tied to, I want to do this because I need to be there more for my family, or I want to be there for my family more. Or like for me, my kids are older and possibly will move away to have their own careers and lives. I want the flexibility to be able to go see them wherever they are. So they're a big part of my who. And
Yeah.
then a when, I always like to get kind of a timeline on where they're thinking in the beginning of when they would like to be in this new position. And that can change along the way
Sure.
as we kind of narrow in on what they want to do if they don't know what it is they want to do. But I like to, it gives us a good starting point of, okay, this is my day, my goal of what I want when I want to make the change.
Yep. Yep. That also helps to just put some structure around the journey, the road trip that
Right.
you're on here. Um,
Mhm.
to have an end date or an end goal that you
Mhm.
can strive for. And again, and obviously, like you said, it can move. It can move a little bit.
Right.
You can nudge it forward or backwards, depending on what happens and, the divergent paths that come your way through the journey.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I love that you talked about the why, the who, and the when. I would insert a what in there. I think that has to be clear as well. But
Mhm.
can you tell us maybe how this has played out for, a client of yours?
Mhm. So, as far as, like, the why, the who,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I think the way I see it play out, and I think of like, a few different clients, but where it helps them is as they are going through this journey, because we've got the why established pretty early, they start learning a lot about themselves, things they didn't realize. They do have a lot of these, like, aha moments, for lack of a better word, where they're starting to understand their past choices and their current choices and how they can move forward. I've seen it play out where they come in and they know they want to change, but they really haven't pinpointed why they want this change. And they might have a loose definition of it, but not really, haven't really put in the time to think it through. And I think that's where a coach comes in clutch and handy for this, because they really help you slow down. This is the one thing we're going to focus on for this hour, right? So we can really get in tuned with why you're doing this as we move forward. And I've seen it play out where maybe throughout this path, an offer comes to them that they weren't expecting, like a job offer that they weren't expecting in the beginning of our journey together. And so when this offer comes through, we're able to use all of these things that they've learned about themselves, not just their why, but also their values is a huge piece of this. And sometimes I call it like they're like core, like pillars of who they are, of what they want in life and who they are in life. And they can see if it matches with those values and those core pillars of who they are. And does it match their why and what they want? And so when you have this offer, now you have this such a good foundation that you can make a really solid decision and feel good about that choice. Because I think one thing when people first come to me is they, like we talked about, they're scared to make that choice. And one of the reasons why is because they they want to know if it's going to work out, right? Like,
Right.
is this actually the right path for me? Or am I making a mistake?
Right.
So, as we can get all of this foundation work done, when you do get that offer to make a change, you have a better sense that it's the right thing to do. Now, we can't predict the future, right? Like, we can't control what's going to happen, but you can feel good in your choices.
Yeah. And, it occurs to me, Megan, that, every decision we make is based on the information we have at the moment, right? And that's
Hmm.
all we can do is make a
Right.
decision based on that information. Because as you said, we don't know what's happening tomorrow. Uh, but if you base the decision on the fact that it honors your why and your core values, you can't
Hmm.
make a bad decision if it is based on that, if it honors those things.
Right.
And you can feel very confident that in the moment, and there's no telling what will happen after the fact, but in the moment, this is a good decision to make. And you can feel really confident about that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said the word confident, because I think that is often, whether it's something they're seeking or not, in the
Right.
beginning, it's a side effect of the
Yeah.
of going
Yeah.
through this coaching, right? Is gaining that confidence in the choices you're making, in who you are, in what you want.
And it's often the
And
feeling that they come in with is that lack of confidence, right?
mhm,
Because they're not sure
right,
of, in your terms, the why, the who, or the when.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I would,
no, for sure.
yeah.
And I love, that's one of the most, like, I'd say, gratifying things as their coach, is to see that, because we get to see that journey and how they grow.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best feelings ever to see, you know, how far they come
I
in that
agree. The
process.
transformation that can happen when people uh, sit with this process
Mhm,
and kind of walk the path, the transformation they feel in themselves is tremendous. And for us as coaches to help facilitate that, there's nothing more
mhm,
gratifying in my world. Nothing more gratifying. It's really
right,
fun. And I learn as much or more about coaching, about me, about so much. They teach me as much as I teach them. I love the relationship that we can build with clients, and they are often long-standing
mhm,
relationships. And
yeah, and I think it makes
as they evolve further, I've had many clients come back to me and say, "Okay, what about this one now?
right,
I've been thrown a little bit of a curveball here today.
mhm,
What about this? How do I get through this?" And although they have all the tools in their treasure chest already, they need to be reminded sometimes about which ones to dust off that will help them
mhm,
in this next process. Yeah, the
so
seasons
true,
of
yeah,
life, right?
yes.
The seasons of life. So, what would you recommend for someone who might find themselves struggling with
Mhm,
making a decision like this that we just talked about?
yeah. So I think one thing, and this is one thing I do at the very beginning coaching with somebody, is to think about what you want for your future. Really, we get a very clear picture of the vision you have. Say they kind of pick their timeline, but it can be 3 years, 5 years down the line, 10 years if you feel like you can think that far out. And really think about how you want your life to look. This isn't just about your career. This is how you want your life to look. You can take into account maybe what'll change over those few years. Like we said, we can't predict everything, but maybe, we do know we'll have kids moving out of the house, or maybe we know we'll get married or have kids, or those different things that are coming down. Maybe our parents are getting older. So really look at what practically is going to be happening in your life, but also I want you to dream and think about what you want in your future, what you want your life to look like. Because we often get stuck in a pattern or routine of just in and out of our day-to-day life. And it can even be one that's like not really joyful or satisfying, but we get stuck in it and it's comfortable. Even if it's not a very happy one, it's comfortable because we know it. It's familiar. It feels safe. But if you can really think intentionally about what you want in your future, you can plan that path to make the changes you need to make in order to get to that future vision you see for yourself. So I think that's, first of all, that's like my biggest recommendation. I think another good thing to do is remember that you have a choice, like we talked about, that you are allowed to make a change in your life to make it simpler or easier or more fun, whatever it is you're seeking. You can make the change to bring more of that into your world. One of mine was joy. I wanted to have joy. I wanted to give joy. And that is what led me to one of the things that led me to coaching.
Love that.
And I think the last thing I would recommend is to really think about what your priorities are. Be honest with yourself. What has changed since you started this job or started this career? What has shifted in your life and what are your new priorities? Like literally sit down with a piece of paper and write them out. And because a lot of times your priorities in your life are going to determine how satisfied you are in your career. Because if the career, like we've been talking about, doesn't allow you to meet those priorities in your personal life, you're going to have some, you're not going to feel fulfilled. And I think when you find a job or career that aligns with your priorities, it allows your career to align with your life. So
And
we
that
get to
brings
balance
joy.
them. Yes, and that brings joy.
And that brings joy. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I love that. So, there's some things I want people to take away from today's conversation, Megan, that I think are simple, not easy, but yeah. Let's kind of wrap this up in a bow. We end every show with tips from my guests. So you've just shared, 3 really good practices. Let's just wrap all this up in the bow. What are the things they should take away from today's conversation?
Well, I think, yeah, just those, remember you have a choice. And I think to practically look at your life. So I like to, in my coaching, I like to look at practical aspects. We dream a little bit and we focus on that mindset to make it all come together. So I think if you really examine your life and your priorities, especially if you're having, maybe you're in a moment in a career that you liked, and all of a sudden you're finding yourself not really enjoying it as much. One of the things to look at is to see if you've had one of these major life changes, something that has shifted your priorities. Sometimes we're unaware that can cause the discontent at work. We
Yeah,
might
and
think it's the
it
job.
occurs, if I could interrupt just for a second,
Yeah.
it occurs to me that we've been talking about life events that could precipitate a shift in us. It might also come from within.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? It could be something that has happened to us, just the way we think about things, the way things priorities or values shift. It could be an
Your values shift.
internal
Yeah.
event, right?
Yes. Your
Yeah.
perspective can change, like we talked
Yep.
about with like health scares or things like that. You see things differently. Our
Yeah.
values change
They
as
do. They do.
we grow, as
As
they
they
should.
should. As they should.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. As
Yeah.
they should. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, just really get honest with your priorities and think about how you can intentionally make changes in your career that will complement your life, basically.
Yeah. Because don't forget, it's only 1/7. Your career is only 1/7 of
Right,
all the other
right.
things that go on in your life, but you spend much more time
So much time.
doing it that it,
Right.
it has a huge effect. So aligning, I love to say,
Mhm.
when your career is a soulful fit, it won't become a soul sucking experience, and that's when it affects the rest of your life.
Yes, yes. That's
Yeah.
how I used to describe one of my last jobs as a nurse, was soul sucking.
Soul sucking, yeah. So,
Yeah,
I think a lot of us have been in positions that feel like that, right? It feels like they're
right,
just sucking the life out of me. And
right.
and I don't it's not what I want anymore. It's probably not what I've wanted for a very long time, but getting caught in that, you called it, stuck in the pattern, in that
Mhm.
comfort zone and being afraid
Right.
that it's that fear of the unknown. There's so many fears that
Mhm.
can be wrapped up in this.
Yes.
Yeah, but just deciding first to do something for yourself, I
Mhm.
think is the first step, and then don't do it alone.
Right. The support is so
So important.
invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
don't do it alone. Yeah.
So valuable. Yeah.
Well, Megan, I knew that you and I were kindred spirits when we first met, and our approaches are a bit different, but the end result is, getting that transformation for our clients,
Mhm.
so that they feel like they are working in an environment, in a career, at a job that fulfills them, so that they can enjoy the rest of their lives. That's really the
Yes.
goal. That's really the
Exactly.
goal.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Megan. I really appreciate your sharing your time and your tips, and your stories of other clients and a little bit of that process that you use. So I know that there are going to be some people who want to reach out and chat with you. What's the one best way for them to do that?
I think the best way is to go to my website, which is coachingwithmegan.com. And I always remind people that's Megan with an H, because Megan is spelled so many different ways,
Yeah,
Meghan. And on my website, you'll find a button where you can get a consult, where we'll do a little bit of coaching. I'll find out about you and what your goals are and see if we're a fit for each other. And also, I have a fun quiz on there
yeah.
that helps you figure out if you're ready for a career change. And it takes less than 2 minutes to do. And you'll get lots of tips and tools delivered to your email box with that too.
Great. And the link for that quiz is going to be in the show notes below. So don't forget to check
Awesome.
those out. Megan, thank you again. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you being with us.
Same here. Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. And for those of you watching and listening, I want to thank you. I appreciate that you are a part of this community. And if you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot if you would subscribe, comment, or click a star and share it. And as I said at the top of the show, I love creating and sharing resources for women. Plus, as a career and life coach myself, I work with women to help them navigate challenging times more quickly and gracefully. So, if something in this episode resonates and you would like a fresh perspective, let's talk about it. Let's continue this conversation in my private Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap. And the link for that is below in the show notes as well. So let's meet again here next Wednesday. As always, same time, same place, because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan. Till next time, I'm here helping you turn transition into triumph.